that in order to be, once you got saved, then you had to follow all the Jewish laws and regulations, just like the Jews were supposed to do before Christ came on the scene. And it was really causing issues. Now, the Jewish people, they were already had this background. They grew up that way, so it was no, if you will, no big deal for them to say, oh yeah, we're supposed to follow these laws. That's what we've been doing. That's how we were taught. But for the Gentile believers who had not been raised that way, that wasn't in their culture to do these things. And here were people coming around and saying, oh, well, not only do you need to be saved, but now you got to act and do everything just like us Jews do. And wait a minute. Now, of course, Paul, being a Pharisee in his, I'm going to say his former life, before he was saved, he was used to laws and regulations. Man, they had a whole list of them, all the do's and the don'ts that you were supposed to follow. So Paul, once he got saved, or Saul of Tarsus, whose Roman name is Paul, Saul is the Hebrew name, he was used to this, okay? So once he got saved, he saw the freedom, if you will. You know, God is not set down for Christians. Okay, here's a list of all the rules, okay? Follow them. Wait a minute. Didn't the Jews have a list of rules?
Yes.
How many did they follow?
They tried to follow all of them.
How many rules did Adam and Eve have? And they followed it, right? For a while. Okay. Yeah. Left on our own, we don't follow the rules very good. Okay? Well, why not? They don't apply to us, okay?
There's sometimes you have to do things differently to get the job done. Not that it's wrong.
Yep.
I mean, if you're talking to someone about salvation, and they said, meet me over here, and it's a place you don't normally go, I probably would go there and tell them the plan of salvation.
Yep.
Okay, I've gone into a bar now. But I have an ulterior motive. I'm not there to drink.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, I mean, nowhere in the Bible, I'm gonna really shock you here. Nowhere in the Bible does it say, don't go into this certain place. It doesn't say that. Well, why not? How many,
The other
how,
ones come.
okay. How big would our Bible be if all it was lists of rules? Do this, don't do that. Oh, you can't do this. Well, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, that's what the Pharisees had done. You know, they took all those laws and statutes from the Old Testament, and then they added a few more, you know, sometimes clarifications, sometimes traditions, okay?
Well, Jesus broke it down to two.
Yep.
Love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And if you do those two things, really, you're not going to steal from your neighbor, you're not going to kill your neighbor, you're not going to, covet his stuff. And toward God, you're going to love him with all your heart. You will do the things that you're supposed to.
Yes, but who is my neighbor? If I'm supposed to love my neighbor as my, isn't that what the guy asked? What was he looking for? A way out, exactly. Well, you say I have to love my neighbor. Well, can you define who that is? And that's what they were asking. That's what they were asking Jesus. Well, that would get them out of a whole bunch of stuff, if they didn't have to love everybody. Okay, but this is what Paul's dealing with here. Now he's completed. I'll give you the time frame here. He's completed the first missionary journey with Barnabas, and look at chapter 2, verse 1 here. says, then 14 years after I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas and took Titus with me also. All right. So it's been 14 years since the last time Paul was in Jerusalem. Now, just after his salvation in a year or so, he had been to Jerusalem for a period of 15 days, and he talks about that in the previous chapter. And he had some conversations with Peter and John, and the leaders of the church at the time. Didn't have extensive meetings, but he did meet with them because he was letting them know what God had done for him, his salvation. And then Paul went back to an area around Damascus, Arabia there, and eventually ended up in Tarshish, where he was preaching. Eventually, Barnabas, when he had gone up to the city of Antioch, then he had heard about Paul. He kind of knew what Paul was doing. He had gone up to Tarshish, had Paul come down to the city of Antioch, and they spent a year preaching, teaching, and then they went on started their missionary journey. Well, this is at the end of that. After that missionary journey, they came back to Antioch, had reported to the church, and now they've gone down to Jerusalem. Okay, Barnabas, who was originally from Jerusalem, now Saul of Tarshish, okay, he was in Jerusalem because he had been in training. He spent years there. Okay, probably came down as a young teenager, went to the schools, to the college, to the seminary, however you want to call it, there in Jerusalem, being taught, being trained in the ways of a Pharisee. Okay, and what's the next thing we hear about? Where's the first thing that we hear about this Saul of Tarshish? Where are we first introduced to him at? In Acts. It's a stoning of Stephen, or Stephen, however you want to pronounce it. Okay, and he's the coat guy. he's watching the stuff while they're stoning this guy. Okay, wouldn't that be a nice job to have? What? But he was consenting onto it. And then what's the next thing we hear about him doing after that?
Got a bunch of papers so he could go and get some more Christians to persecute.
Well, he started in Jerusalem there, okay, being a very, very zealous Jew, going in and persecuting, dragging out, sending them to prison, sometimes to death, anyone who was following Christ, who dared to follow Christ. Right? And he was so zealous after, doing Jerusalem here, he wanted to go to Damascus. Okay, so he got letters. For some reason, piracy stuck up my mind. They used to call them letters of marque. Well, that was official papers, if you will, that I'm allowed to do this. I can attack people and take their stuff, I'm not a pirate. I'm following the king. Yeah, okay. You say so. I think it's the same thing, okay. But Paul had letters from the high priest and from the Sanhedrin to do this, even in Damascus, for crying out loud. So he was on his way to Damascus when he had his come to Jesus meeting, okay. He was saved, blinded, okay, because of the light. Went to Damascus, and then Ananias came to him, healed him of his blindness. So this is like scales falling off his eyes, okay? And then what did Paul start doing right away? Preaching. Now wait a minute, this is the guy that's been terrorizing Christians, and now you want us to listen to him preach? What's wrong with this picture? Okay? But that's what was happening. Okay? Now, the people in Jerusalem, what was their memory of this man?
He wreaked
that he was trying to destroy the churches. Now here's this whole time period later where Paul's been out teaching, giving the gospel message out, and now he's come back to Jerusalem. Of course, Barnabas was from Jerusalem. He was one of the original deacons, I guess you want to call it. And he had been very instrumental in Paul's work there. And also this young man Titus. What do we know about Titus? His father was a Greek. Okay. His mother was a Hebrus, a Jewish, however you want to call it, a female of the Jewish followers of the Hebrews. Okay. So Titus had been raised, half and half, if you will. He knew some of the Jewish stuff, but because his father was a Greek, he didn't follow all the Jewish laws and regulations. He had not been circumcised as a child. So people recognized that he was not a Jew, okay? Because he didn't follow all the Jewish things, okay? Verse 2 here. And he says, I went up by revelation and communicated with them that gospel which I preached unto the Gentiles, but privately to them which are of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain. He went up by revelation. What's different than going by revelation than going by commandment? God laid it on his heart to go. He wasn't commanded to come down to Jerusalem by the leaders of the church. Okay, he says, God put it in my mind to go and discuss, because the Judaizers that were going around preaching you had to not only be saved, but you had to follow the Jewish religion. This was causing real issues. So Paul went to Jerusalem, okay, and he talked with the leaders about what he was teaching about the gospel. Okay? Where did Paul get his gospel message from? Directly from Christ. Do you think he had the real information? He didn't get it from someone else's, this is my teaching, so you follow that. No. Paul got his message directly from Christ. Okay? And Paul was very clear about what the gospel message was. Okay? In Corinthians chapter 15, he gives a very clear description. This is the gospel, that Christ died for us, that he died, he was buried, he rose again. And if you don't believe he rose again, there's a whole bunch of people you can go talk to. Okay? Because a bunch of them are, at that time, he says a lot of them are still alive. You can go talk to them. They saw Christ physically, okay? They talked with him. They ate with him. They knew that this was not just an aberration or a ghost. This guy was real, okay? We know what happened, okay? And he makes a reference here at the end of verse 2. He says that I should run or had run in vain. Now, he's kind of doing a metaphor here about a race. Okay? So if you're a runner, and Paul alludes several different times, now we got the Olympics, the Winter Olympics coming up. What do those athletes have to do? Train. Why? Well, I think I can go do this, so I'm just going to go in the Olympics and I'm going to take the downhill slalom. Yeah, well, no, that's not going to work. I tried to ski a couple times. After falling down the hill quite a ways, and this guy come up and said, yeah, I know what you feel like. Yeah, really? I ain't doing this again. Who Who got this idea of strapping 2 sticks to your feet and going down a steep slope? Okay. Not for me, sorry. But, you know, athletes have to train for the sport that they're going to participate in, okay? Well, why do they do that? I mean, if you just want to run, just go out and run, you know? You don't have to be fast. You don't have to, you know, do it within a certain time. But if you're in a competition, and especially the Olympics, you're trying to hit a certain mark, you know, usually timed or something, depending on the event, that you have to do it better than others, okay, if you're going to achieve the win. So you have to set goals, okay? Now, if you're a runner, especially in a long distance race, you even while you're running, you have goals that you're trying to set, okay? You're trying to, okay, I need to be at this point within this amount of time to have any chance of winning this. Back to the slalom racers, a lot of times as you're watching the competitions, they'll have like 2 different clocks running. This is the best person's time, you know, where they were at on the course, and then the one that's actually doing, you know, the race at the moment, what their time is. So you see these 2 different clocks running. So how is this person comparing to that person's best time? You know, so you're trying to hit those points. So that's what Paul's saying here, that I should run in vain. I'm setting goals. I have a mission to do, and that's what I've been doing. I'm not running in vain. I'm doing what God has asked me to do. Look at verse 3. But neither Titus, who was with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So Paul says, why I was at Jerusalem and I was talking with the church leaders, nobody turned to Titus and said, you got to get circumcised because you're not a circumcised Jew. What? What's that got to do with it? Just the point, nothing. Was Titus saved? Yes. Well, didn't he have to follow all the Jewish regulations? I mean, he was traveling with a couple Jews, for crying out loud. No. Okay. But Paul did not teach that you had to follow the Jewish regulations. Okay? He taught that salvation was by grace. Okay? It is a gift of God. It's not something you work for. It's not something you've got to do all this stuff, you know, to make sure that you stay saved. No, that's not what Paul taught. And he says Titus wasn't compelled to start following by the Jewish leaders there. Okay, so that was not an issue to determine whether Paul or Titus was saved or not. Okay. Verse 4, and that because of false brethren, unawares brought in, who came in privately to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage. There were people even in Jerusalem, okay, who were teaching that you had to become like a Jew, okay, in order for salvation. Did Jesus ever teach that? Did Jesus ever talk to Gentiles? Sure did. Okay. There was, you know, the woman at the well. What happened to most of that village? They got saved. Well, wait a minute, aren't they just half-breeds, half Jews? You know, that group in Samaria there, you know, they're we can't even deal with them because they're not true, full-blooded Jews who follow all the Jewish rules and regulations from the Old Testament. Well, no. Did it matter to Jesus? He had an appointment. He told them, I must needs go through. Wait a minute, we don't go through there. We go around there. We can't do that. Did his disciples kind of wonder at him? Sure they did. When they come back, they'd gone into town to buy some food and supply. They came back out, and here's Jesus at the well talking to a Samaritan woman. What's wrong with this picture? Jewish men would not talk to a woman, unaccompanied to start with, but who was a Samaritan, who was not Jewish, okay? They wouldn't go into their homes to eat or anything, okay? And what are you doing? What's wrong with you? Well, then he said he had food to eat that they didn't know about. Wait a minute, we went and got lunch. Where'd you get food from, okay? They didn't understand what was going on. But as they observed, not only this woman gets the men of the city, you got to come and listen to this guy, because there's something different here, man. he knows all about me, that I've been married 6 times, and now I'm living with a guy I'm not married to. How did he know that? Okay, something's different about this guy. Okay, that's right. Now, how did they know about the Messiah?
Well, they still were Jews.
They were, that was still part of the teaching, even though they didn't worship God the way the Jews did. Okay, there were still within the the country of Israel. Okay, when the 2 kingdoms divided, if you read through Kings and Chronicles, there, you find that the leaders, the kings of the northern empire, Israel, what is that thing that they say about them? They did not do what was right, or he followed as his father. Unfortunately, Ahab got to be a good either Jeroboam and then Ahab. Wouldn't you like to be compared to Ahab? I mean, what a thing to strive for, right? No. Now, for the southern kingdom of Judah, what was the thing you were looking for there? Who were you going to be compared to with? David. Okay. Was David perfect? No. But God, he had a heart that followed God. Okay. So that was that's what you were going to be compared to, if you will. Okay. So even in Jerusalem here, there were people teaching incorrectly. Okay. So Paul, he goes, I want to get a resolution here. Okay. I want what's the real thing we should be teaching? Okay. Yep. So, so he said, even while we were there and we're talking there were people that had come in that were spying out his liberty. Okay. Well, what's he talking about? Titus. Okay. Part of it was Titus. But what is our Christian liberty?
To do what God would have us do.
Yeah. To follow God. Not follow a list of rules, okay? Well, you have to follow all of these things from the Old Testament. That's what God said we have to do.
So Jesus took the law, though, and he made it even more specific. He's like, so it says that, it says don't commit adultery, but then he says, but if you're thinking about it, okay, so his law was even more specific because of the heart of it.
The Jews, the scribes, the Pharisees, the leaders, okay, the lawyers, they knew the Old Testament, okay, and they taught people how it was supposed to be applied. But here's the ways you get around it. Wait a minute. Okay. Jesus saw them teaching the ways, to get around the rules, and just like you're saying, we want to find ways to get around stuff. Okay. Yeah, that's what we're supposed to do, but wouldn't it be easier if we did this? Okay, more beneficial to me. Well, I mean, that's what they were doing. Oh, you're supposed to take care of your parents. Oh, well, we have ways around that too. Okay. So we don't, because that's a financial burden. If we're supposed to take care of our elderly parents, I don't want to spend my money that way. I want to spend it on me. It's whatever you should have got. Well, we'll call that a donation. So, wait a minute. And Jesus confronted them about that as well. Okay, so there were those that even here in Jerusalem that were teaching the wrong gospel. Paul says, hey, they were trying to ferret us out, if you will. They were trying to see what was going on here. Okay, how they could accuse them. Yeah, to bring them into bondage, as he said at the end of verse 4 there. Okay, verse 5. To whom we gave place by subjection. No, not for an hour. Okay, so he said, did we let them get their way? No, not a bit. No, not at all. That the truth of the gospel might continue with you. Paul wanted to be very clear on this issue, okay, about salvation by grace. It's not anything we do ourselves. After we're saved, it's not works that keep us saved. Now, after we're saved, should there be good works? Okay, fruit of the Spirit, that's evidence to be. Is it required that you do certain things? No. Okay. The fact that, you have to do this, and this, that's not what saves you or keeps you saved. Okay? Salvation is the free gift of God. But after we're saved, there's things that we should be doing as Christians. Okay? People should be seeing that evidence in our life, not because we've got to do this. No, but as our love for God, it should be coming out in our lives. That should be happening. Okay? Verse 6. But of these who seem to be somewhat, whatsoever they were, it maketh no matter to me. God accepteth no man's person. For they who seemeth to be something in conference added nothing to me. There were people who were trying to push their ideas onto others so that they would look good. Okay? Paul said, I saw this in the Pharisees. As a matter of fact, I was one of them. Okay, and he even if you want to look at the zealousy of the Pharisees, boy, I was way up here. Okay, I was doing everything. Okay, I did this. What did you do it for? Oh, so that I could be up here. Okay. That it was just for self, okay, and what others thought. So they thought, and Paul even acknowledged that. He goes, everything I did, I thought I was serving God by doing it. Once Jesus had a talk with me, I realized that's not what I was doing. Okay, what did Jesus say? Why are you kicking against the pricks? Who are you persecuting, Saul? Why are you kicking against the pricks? I'm telling you what you're supposed to do. Okay? Stop fighting against God. Did Paul realize he was fighting against God? Not until that experience. Then his eyes were open. No, he was blind for 3. Well, his mind's eye got opened, okay? God had to really, if we say, say like with the mule, you got to get his attention first, okay? God got his attention, okay? And Paul saw this still going on here in Jerusalem, but he was not going to give way to what these others were teaching, okay? So verse 7 here, it says, but contrariwise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. What is he talking about? Well, what was the Jews named for all these other people who weren't Jews? Gentiles or the uncircumcised. Well, heathens got in there too, but you know, if they referred to the uncircumcised, that was everyone who wasn't a Jew. Okay? If they referred to as the circumcised, they referred to people that were a Jew. Now, in that day and time, that was a big distinction.
And Peter's ministry
Okay?
was to the Jews.
Peter and the others, their primary ministry. Now, did Peter ever witness to Gentiles and have those Gentiles get saved? Remember, Peter had an unusual experience. Okay? Well, it was a vision. He was up on a rooftop. Okay, when we find this in Acts chapter 11, but he was up on a rooftop. It was getting lunchtime. He kind of fell into a daze. Remember what he saw? This great big sheet, okay, like lowered down, and there were all kinds of animals in there. And he was told, rise, kill, and eat. Now, as a good Jew, okay, you followed the kosher laws, okay? There's only certain things you could eat. You just didn't eat anything. And here were all these different animals. A lot of them weren't kosher. And I'm supposed to rise and eat? Wait a minute. Nope. And this happened to him 3 times. Remember what Jesus told him? What I have declared clean, don't call the unclean. And then 3 men show up at the door asking for him to go talk to a centurion, a Roman soldier, okay, Cornelius. And, you know, Paul goes, you know, Lord had told him, go with these guys. He went with them to Cornelius' house. Cornelius not only had his staff, okay, all his family, you know, his servants, everybody come in and listen. And it says they got saved. Well, wait a minute. They weren't Jews. How did they get saved? Well, God saved them, not Peter. Okay. God used Peter. Yeah, God was making a point to Peter. It says, you know, it's not just Jews that can get saved. Gentiles get saved too. Okay. Now, in Jerusalem, I mean, most of their audience is what? Jews. Okay. Were there Gentiles in Jerusalem? Yes. Okay. But most of the people that were getting saved were Jews. Okay. There were a few who weren't, and these other people had risen up saying, oh, no, you got to follow, you don't follow the Jewish, you know, stuff, so you can't really be saved. You got to follow the Jewish. Now, some of them went to the point was, you got to become a Jew first before you can get saved. Well, that's a bunch of baloney too. Okay? That's not how it worked. Okay? Jesus didn't require those Samaritans to become full Jews first before they believed on him. Why? And Cornelius and the others weren't required to become full Jews first and then get saved. No, that's not how God works. Okay? But Paul's making the distinction here. Peter and the other apostles, their primary mission was to Jewish people. Okay? Well, where were the Jews located at this time? Just in Jerusalem and Judea? They were all over. Well, how'd they get all over? Well, let's go back to the persecution, but remember the northern kingdom got taken over by the Assyrians. What did the Assyrians do to most of the population?
They took them out of there and put other people.
The Assyrians, when they took over an area, they took the local population, or most of it, and moved it to various other places in their kingdom, and they brought people from other parts in to settle. That's who the Samaritans became. That's what the Samaritans are. Okay, so it was mixed. Okay, there were people from all over the place, and then Jews spread out. Okay, eventually the Babylonians captured the kingdom of Judah. Okay, and a lot of Jews were taken into the Babylonian Empire in various places. And then if you read the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, their return. Did everybody return? Did all the Jews return? No. Right? The first group was like 42,000. I mean, that's a huge group, but it wasn't everybody. Okay? Not everybody came back. So now where are Jews today? Everybody's in Israel, right? No, there's more actually living in the United States than there is in the nation of Israel. What? How'd they get here? Okay. Well, they're all over the place, okay? Yeah, it didn't just happen, okay? So there were Jews everywhere. When Paul and Barnabas, when they went into a new area, who did they make first contact with? Usually the Jews, okay? If there was a synagogue there, okay? The synagogue was the Jewish place of worship. They would start there, okay? Because the Jews were supposed, by their teaching anyway, they were supposed to know about the Messiah, okay? In the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah coming and stuff, and then Paul preached, Christ is the Messiah, okay? Okay, so that's where the message went, okay? So they were going to it. Verse 8, for he that wrought effectively in Peter to the apostleship of the circumcision, the same was mighty in me toward the Gentiles. Where did Peter and the others get their apostleship from? A direct commission from Christ. Where did Paul get his apostleship mission from? Christ. Okay. He got direct commission, okay? Well, that's what makes you an apostle, okay? Are there any apostles today? No. Why not? We ain't that old, folks. Did we personally see Christ? Or see the resurrected Christ? You haven't, Ken? You haven't? Oh. You didn't sit under his teaching? No. We're not that old, folks. Okay? So, yeah, the apostles were of the originals, if you will. Okay? So they got their commissions, if you will, directly from Christ. Okay? Verse 9. And when James, Cephas, Peter, and John, who seemed to be the pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship, that we should go unto the heathen, the Gentiles, the uncircumcised, and they unto the circumcision. Okay? Who's this James? Okay, this is the half-brother of Jesus. Okay? I mean, he was one of the disciples, the apostles? Yes, he was. Okay? It talks about James the younger. Okay? It's kind of confusing at times because there's duplicate names. Okay? What about this John? Isn't he normally associated with the James? James and John's, the sons of Zebedee, sons of thunder. Okay? And Cephas, Peter, the rock. Okay? We hear there's quite a bit about Peter. Okay? Some good, some bad, but Peter was, open to mouth and stick in a foot sometimes. But he
walked on water.
yeah, he was the one that stepped out of the boat and walked on the water. Yeah. Wait a minute. Would you have done that? Yeah. He trusted Christ. Okay. But these three, were, if you will, the leaders of the local churches there in Jerusalem. Okay, so they were looked up as the pillars. Well, where were all the other disciples at this time? Well, a couple of them have already been killed, had been martyred. Okay, the other James, John's brother, was one of those that had been killed. Okay, so these three, James, Cephas, John, okay, they were the leaders, the pillars of the church here. Okay, and they extended to them the right hand of fellowship. What does that statement mean?
They were with them in the work.
They were accepted of them as equals. Okay? That Paul indeed had a mission, a commission, or direction from God to go to the Gentiles, while their primary mission was to the Jews, to the circumcised. Okay? Why didn't the apostles, the original disciples, why didn't they just spread all over the world? Weren't that what they're supposed to do? Well, they were primarily leaders there in Jerusalem and Judea. Okay, that was their, if you will, that was their primary mission field. Okay, other people went out, Barnabas being one of them. Okay, and in other areas, and Philip, another one of those original deacons, went out and ministered to people. We're told about them, and this was happening over and over again, that those people that had got saved, it says a lot of them got spread out through the persecution that was going on, part of by Saul of Tarsus. They spread out from Jerusalem to other parts of the world, and as they went around, they were teaching, they were telling people they had gotten saved. They were talking about Jesus. Churches were started. Sometimes when Paul and Barnabas, and then Paul and Silas, as they went through the missionary journeys, they would come to areas, well, there were people that already knew about Jesus. Okay, well, they rounded them up, if you will, and this is the core of our church. We're going to get this going. Okay, so this is what was happening, and it says they extended to them the right hand of fellowship. They accepted them that we, okay, they reconfirmed, if you will, Paul, your mission field's the Gentiles. Our mission field is the Jews. Okay, verse 10. Only they would that we should remember the poor, the same which I was also forward to do. One of the things that Paul went to Jerusalem for, not only to clear up this other issue, but he had an offering that had been gathered, taken back to help the poor Christians there in Jerusalem. They were going through a time of famine. A man by the name of Argus, a prophet, had foretold this, that it was going to happen, and it was happening. So there were people who were in dire straits. Okay, so Paul had taken up money, and then later on, and we find that in Corinthians too, after the second missionary journey there, they were taking up another collection, okay, and going to send it to Jerusalem after the third missionary journey, and that's how Paul ended up in Jerusalem the other time, okay. So he had gone there, and they confirmed this, okay. This is the gospel message, okay, that it's through salvation by faith, not by what you're doing, okay. Don't we have to get to a certain point first, and then we can get saved? If that was so, we would be in real trouble, folks. Because how can we get there? Well, I'm just going to make up my mind that I'm going to, be super